This is Talking with Burritos, the side dish to your media entertainment consumption. We not only love to watch movies, but we like to keep the conversation going after the movie. In this episode, we continue our alien-themed series, actually 4 episodes, with a recording about alien invasion. And to help us frame this picture, we watched the 2005 adaptation of H.G. Wells' book, War of the Worlds. We actually ingested it maybe 3 different ways, if you want to say, via audiobook, audiobook podcast, the movie, and the 1939 Orson Welles radio series. And with those, we made an episode. Now, this is going to be a little bit different than some of our normal episodes because as things do happen, we actually had a little problem with the recording. So we're going to do this differently in order to add some good content for you guys. So let's get on with the episode. We're going to start with War of the Worlds.
Professor Pearson has passed me a message which he has just received. Professor, may I read the message to the listening audience?
Certainly, Mr.
Ladies and gentlemen, I shall read you a wire addressed to Professor Pearson from Dr. Gray of the Natural History Museum, New York. Quote, 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Seismograph registered shock of almost earthquake intensity occurring within a radius of 20 miles of Princeton. Please investigate. Signed, Lloyd Gray, Chief of Astronomical Division. Unquote. Professor Pearson, could this occurrence possibly have something to do with the disturbances observed on the planet Mars?
Hardly, Mr. Phillips. This is probably a meteorite of unusual size, and its arrival at this particular time is merely a coincidence. However, we shall conduct a search as soon as daylight permits.
Thank you, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 10 minutes, we've been speaking to you from the observatory at Princeton, bringing you a special interview with Professor Pearson, noted astronomer. This is Carl Phillips speaking. We are returning you now to our New York studio.
Okay, the book War of the Worlds was written in 1898 by H.G. Wells, not Orson Welles. He was a popular novelist. He wrote about politics. He wrote poetry. And during this time, some of his most prolific works were that of the science romance genre. Science romance is actually science fiction. Back in those days, he was among, such writers as Jules Verne, who wrote the Journey to the Center of the Earth just years before him. Also, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote The Lost World, and not The Lost World, Jurassic Park, or Michael Crichton version. No, this is the original Lost World. I can't remember what it's about. I think it's like people who've discovered Lost World. I don't freaking know. Could be like Lost. Kind of sounds similar to that, right? You end up on a desert planet. You don't know what it is. You don't know where you are. And then all kinds of weird things start happening to you. That might be one to look at because I heard it was actually pretty great. Among a lot of his famous novels, one of his more famous novels, I would say maybe more famous than, because War of the Worlds didn't really get its notoriety till afterwards, till like 1939 with the Orson Welles radio drama. He was able to do that, but The Time Machine, that movie was not the movie. I'm sorry. The book, that's one of his most noted works. Also, he did The Invisible Man and, what's the other one? When Sleeper Awakens. Now, I haven't read that one, but just the title alone makes me wonder how awesome that book is, because just When Sleeper Awakes, that's a great title for a book. Judging by his works, if you go by his previous works, you would probably like that book. I don't doubt that I would. The guy was a great writer, a great novelist. And so in 1898, he wrote this book, War of the Worlds. And what it is an eyewitness account of an alien invasion. What happens is a lot of these people don't go by names, people. They don't go by names in these books. He doesn't give anyone a name. They all just have a title. Like you have the Herrick or what? I think the Herrick or the Derelict, something like that. You have, the ammunition man. You have his wife. Well, it just says his wife or his brother. This narrator.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is the latest bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. Toronto, Canada. Professor Morse of Macmillan University reports observing a total of 3 explosions on the planet Mars between the hours of 7:45 p.m. and 9:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This confirms earlier reports received from American observatories. Now, nearer home, comes a special bulletin from Trenton, New Jersey. It is reported that at 8:50 p.m. a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on a farm in the neighborhood of Grover's Mill, New Jersey, 22 miles from Trenton. The flash in the sky was visible within a radius of several hundred miles, and the noise of the impact was heard as far north as Elizabeth. We have dispatched a special mobile unit to the scene, and we'll have our commentator, Carl Phillips, give you a word picture of the scene as soon as he can reach there from Princeton. In the meantime, we take you to the Hotel Martinet in Brooklyn, where Bobby Millett and his orchestra are offering a program of dance music.
1800s, 19th century, they were able to see Mars. So there was some fascination about Mars, that planet, that little flickering light in the distance. So they witnessed this star over a period of time, and it's just flickering. And then all of a sudden you see streaks expelling from that planet, from that distant planet that they're watching. And no one thought, for a while they watched it. They were very curious. They were looking at it like, hey, what is this thing? What is that light up there? And then after a while, they're just like, okay, this is boring. I'm just going to chill out for a little bit. And so they go for a couple of days without looking at this thing, this phenomenon that's happening out on Mars, and to later discover that he looks through a lens and he sees this bright star, this bright light just coming at them. And they watch it for a while, and it just looks okay, like, okay, well, whatever is doing anything. This thing is just out there. Maybe it's like a meteor. We always dismiss things as meteors. So they ignore it basically until one day it becomes very evident that this thing is heading towards them, towards this English countryside. And so boom, this thing explodes, lands on the ground, causes this pit, this crater. Everyone is like, at first, no one was interested, until the scientist and his stargazing friend. I don't know if that was his name, but I was just going to say that was, what I took from it. Stargazing friend. They're both stargazers, right? And so they're out there watching this thing, and this thing causes this pit, this crater, and they're out there like investigating. And they notice that, it was this like saucer like this disc-like shape, and it just crash landed to Earth. And it's there, and they can hear inside that there's something going on. There's something rambling. They try to help, but they can't really help it. They can't really get this thing out of there. They're doing this. They're watching this thing. And so they're watching as this being. Actually, they're not. Nothing happens. It just sounds like a lot of tinkering, a lot of ticky-tack, 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 ticky-tack. Things moving around within this cylinder. And so then, after a while, curiosity builds in the whole town or countryside, and people travel from, a few miles away, because you got to think about it. They're rather sparse. They're rather separated, distant from one another, but it's a big English countryside, most likely beautiful with greens and all that such. They're watching this thing. They're watching it. They're watching, wondering what is this? And they actually try to help it out of its shell, but, they can't move this metal. They can't move these things, because if you think about, technology and different things, a lot of this technology was well beyond the scope of their imaginations. So it would not move unless, they just kept hearing things shifting and moving aside. Then later on, they start ignoring things. And let's just say after a while, the alien emerges and more of these things come to Earth, crash to Earth, and then starts the invasion. And that's when you get the War of the Worlds. Now, the first book starts out like that. That's most of the first book. But then towards the second half of the first book, I did not know that it was separated into two, because as I was listening, I was thinking like, what? Why is this two? Like, why does this thing go beyond 17 chapters? Because Chris co-host, he was telling me that, oh, this is a short book. And I'm thinking, okay, cool. Give me like 3 hours. Maybe I can finish it. And it was going on for like 5. And I was thinking to myself, like, what the nuggets? Huh? Why? And so I'm listening to it. And it's a great novel. It's a great audiobook. I haven't read the novel because, it would have taken me a little bit more time to actually read it. And I had other things to do. So it's a great novel. So I advise it to everyone to watch, to maybe read and listen. It's always good if you read it and then you listen to it because you really get that effect. You really get that story. And the actual audiobook will maybe fill in a lot of blanks that you miss sometimes when you read and kind of blank out and go to sleep. For the most part, the narrator gives the accounts of this thing happening. They're surrounded by around this pit. And then next thing you know, it starts moving and they see activity. And all of a sudden, this thing, this being, this, as they would call it, tripod, starts heat raying everybody, basically disintegrating everyone with heat ray. They don't know. They didn't provoke it. You could say kids throwing rocks at it and maybe beating on the surface of it to try to get this thing to come out. Maybe that was provoking it. Possibly. Maybe not. We don't know. I didn't get that sense in the book that that's what he was going for. But, it's possible that they could have took that as a sign of aggression. And we'll talk about that later on in our podcast episode, in the discussion episode with Chris. So this thing, this tripod, this alien, this Martian, as they would refer to it later on.
You can see its cylindrical
Just a minute.
shape.
Something's happening. Ladies and gentlemen, this is terrific. This end of the thing is beginning to flake off. The top is beginning to rotate like a screw, and the thing must be hollow.
He's moving! Keep back there! Keep back there! Keep those men back! Keep back there! Keep those idiots back! Keep off! The top's loose! Look out there! Stand back!
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most terrifying thing I've ever witnessed. Wait a minute. Someone's crawling out or something. I can see peering out of that black hole 2 luminous discs. The eyes, it might be a face, might be almost Good heavens, something wriggling out of the shadow like a gray snake. Now it's another one and another one and another one. They look like tentacles to me. Oh yeah, I can see the thing's body now. It's large as a bear. It glistens like wet leather, but that face, ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. It's so awful. The eyes are black and they gleam like a serpent. The mouth is kind of V-shaped with saliva dripping from its rimless lips. It seems to quiver and pulsate, and the monster or whatever it is can hardly move. It seems weighed down by possibly gravity or something. The thing's rising up now, and the crowd falls back. They've seen plenty. The most extraordinary experience, ladies and gentlemen. I can't find words. I'll pull this microphone with me as I talk. I'll have to stop the description until I can take a new position. Hold on, will you please? I'll be right back in a minute.
I think we'll refer to it later on. Starts just disintegrating people and wreaking havoc among this countryside. And you got to think about it. This is pre anything. You don't really have, they have the wheel, so they have like a horse and carriage and things of that nature. So you really don't know what else is going on out there. So this countryside, these people are just, kind of on their own because they don't know what else is happening. They don't know if there's more of these things or where they are. But so then the narrator switches to the accounts of his brother because he basically sends his wife off, I believe, to go and stay with him.
Ladies and gentlemen, am I on? Ladies and gentlemen, here I am, back of a stone wall that adjoins Mr. Wilmer's garden. From here, I get a sweep of the whole scene. I'll give you every detail as long as I can talk and as long as I can see. More state police have arrived. They're drawing up a cordon in front of the pit. About 30 of them. No need to push the crowd back now. They're willing to keep their distance. The captain's conferring with someone. Can't quite see who. Oh, yes, I believe it's Professor Pearson. Yes, it is. Now they've parted, and the professor moves around one side, studying the object while the captain and 2 policemen advance with something in their hands. I can see it now. It's a white handkerchief tied to a pole. Flag of truce. If those creatures know what that means, what anything means. Wait a minute, something's happening. Humped shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror, and it leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Oh, Lord, they're turning into flames. Now the whole field's caught up by the woods, the barns, the gas tanks of the automobiles.
spreading everywhere. It's coming this way now.
Could have been the same
About
one,
20 yards
I'm not
down.
sure. Because there were multiples. So this being shows up. One of those Martian tripods show up and starts wreaking havoc there in London, in the city of London. But the thing is, his brother's account is that of London's invasion and the will to fight back. You know, they had this one machine called the Ironclad, and it's this big, huge ship. Check the show notes at Talking with Burritos /28. You'll be able to see this. I'll put in a picture of it, or you can just type it into Google. Use your good friend Google. It works. It's called the Ironclad, and it's basically a warship. And this warship was able to take one of these things down. But the thing is, what they didn't know about these aliens, these Martians, is that what they would do is would recuperate and then re-strategize. I think it happened as like this, whereas, and this is just all preface for our discussion, you guys. This is a little food for thought. And so when we discuss it, I'm enlightening you. So so you have some knowledge of what the nuggets we're talking about when we actually have our discussion. Okay. So we have this and we're going in, and so they fight back. They destroy one of these things. But the thing is, these things, they lay low for about a couple of days, and then they come back and re-strategize. And so they use various different methods, and they use like the heat ray at first, just disintegrating people. And basically, if you think about strategizing, it's like, you know, decrease the masses so that you can better your chances of destroying them. And so these alien beings come back, but then they come back with a different strategy, and they start misting everyone. And this mist is basically poison. And so they start poisoning everyone, and they start killing out a lot of people. But the thing is, after a while, they start doing what they came here to do. And that's basically to try to...
Ladies and gentlemen, I have just been informed that we have finally established communication with an eyewitness of the tragedy. Professor Pearson has been located at a farmhouse near Grover's Mill, where he has established an emergency observation post. As a scientist, he will give you his explanation of the calamity. The next voice you hear will be that of Professor Pearson, brought to you by direct wire. Professor Pearson.
Of the creatures in the rocket cylinder at Grover's Mill, I can give you no authoritative information, either as to their nature, their origin, or their purposes here on Earth. Of their destructive instrument, I might venture some conjectural explanation. For want of a better term, I shall refer to the mysterious weapon as a heat ray. It's all too evident that these creatures have scientific knowledge far in advance of our own. It's my guess that in some way they are able to generate an intense heat in a chamber of practically absolute non-conductivity. This intense heat they project in a parallel beam against any object they choose by means of a polished parabolic mirror of unknown composition, much as the mirror of a lighthouse projects a beam of light. That is my conjecture of the origin of the heat ray.
Episode 27, you know, you just go /27 for Talking with Burritos.com. And if you do that, you know, we talked about the existence of aliens, and I had shot Chris a few articles, and in one of these articles, the title of the article is "The Aliens Are Dead the aliens are silent because they are dead." And it basically is saying that if there was life on Mars, maybe there was just life on Mars. Thousands, maybe millions or so years ago, there was possibly life on Mars. But yet that life died out after a while. So it's possible that there was there. But so if there was life on Mars, it's either what Chris said, maybe they're in primordial ooze phase. That means that's just a little goopy stuff, microorganisms. And then that's later going to form and be able to come together, form a cellular structure. And then, so if the planet is dead and there were Martians or something, there was life on there, maybe that life has gone extinct. And so now it's in a little recuperating stage. Mars is basically it's going through a stage where the climate may or may not become inhabitable again. So if you think about Earth and you think about the things crashing to Earth and the things that we have to go through to come to this Earth, you know, after the dinosaurs, you know, creation wise. This is not creation wise. This is scientifically, so whatever you believe is whatever you believe. But in this sense, the earth steadily evolved to the state of being where it could cultivate and inhabit and cultivate life. So with that, we go into with that theory that the aliens, maybe they were here. And if you think about the Martians as a diminution of men, you think about that, because the Martians in this story, and so this is why I like to flick back and forth, because he elaborates on a lot of things that they're discussing now, in this new theory and this new obsession. I wouldn't say obsession, thought process about alien existence. Some of a few key facts to take away from this book is that for this discussion is the Martians. This narrator was able to witness that they brought with them bipeds. You know what a biped is? It's someone who walks on two legs, like us. They had a version of that with them, from whence they kind of harnessed, because he noticed them. They were basically food, because they noticed that they would extract the blood and inject it into their own vein, into their own system. I wouldn't say that they have veins or whatever, but it's possible. But they would do that and inject it into the system. So from that, he was able to conclude that most likely they're here to use us as a food source, or to use us as a food source, or just take over this planet if they can inhabit it. Because if that, then they could probably harness us. Think about the pod babies back in the Matrix, how the machines took over and they started using human energy. And so they just basically started breeding us for energy. Another thing about these aliens, these Martians, they had no bodies. They were basically controlled by machines, and they wore clothing. They wore clothing, bodies like clothing. So if you think like our bodies, think about when people say the existence of the soul, and that, our bodies are just our temple and our soul resides in it. So think about these aliens. It's like if they had a body of sort, they wore their skin, they wore their bodies as if it were just clothing. So think about like an exoskeleton, or aliens, or they have the exoskeleton. They just have controlled by mechanism, machinery, other parts. They have that to control, to do those things that they can't functionally do themselves, because they have evolved so far. But then you also have the lack of a digestive system. Hence the whole injecting blood into their cells. Aliens are vampires. That's another theory you can conclude there. I think there have been some theories that aliens are vampires, because, you never really see them that much, but yet you want to believe that they exist. And they, what do they do, people? They take people in the night. They steal you from your bed. You can see bright lights and stuff, but yet they could be. You can have aliens, vampires from outer space. Boom, B movie. They don't speak. They never spoke in this book. And if you see other iterations, they never speak. The aliens never speak, but they do make a series of nouns, of sounds. So like a whale, like something like that. You hear them do that. You would hear them actually make those sorts of noises. So no reproductive organs, just like I said, pod babies. He was able to witness. He said, in this, the narrator of the War of the World, the book, inside the book, I'm talking in his reference, from the book, not my own knowledge. Okay. Just what I read and took from this. He talked about like just watching little pods or something fall off the aliens. And then that would make an alien, that would come to be an alien baby, or an alien baby. So basically like a pod baby, like I said before, that's how they would harness them. They would just be created, and then boom, body, but they never really carried them or anything like that. They was just kind of on their skin and resided there, and then later would fall off when they relied more on technology. He witnessed them just doing all kinds of things, using machinery to harness, people, basically, to harness people. Like when he's witnessed the bipeds, he saw them like basically being carried within a structure, and moved around like that. And so that's what they would do with humans. And, in the way they moved around, the big tripods, that's how they would move. They lacked everything else. It seems like, because he was telling the story of this other scientist, who broke down their physiology and the theory thereof that I'm proposing to you guys right now, that I'm retorting to you guys right now, is that they just basically could be an evolution of human. And that's what kind of like struck me, like, what? Because how we are evolving now, more technology based, everything basically technology. Think about the scooters, people. And it seems like Wall-E, the whole story of Wall-E, is not too far away, you know, about the evolution and diminution of human.
Streets are all jammed. Noise in crowds like New Year's Eve in city. Wait a minute, the enemy's now in sight above the Palisades. Five great machines. First one is crossing the river. I can see it from here, wading the Hudson like a man wading through a brook. A bulletin is handed me. Martian cylinders are falling all over the country. One outside of Buffalo, one in Chicago, St. Louis. Seem to be timed and spaced. Now the first machine reaches the shore. He stands watching, looking over the city. Steel cowlish head is even with the skyscrapers. He waits for the others. They rise like a line of new towers on the city's west side. Now they're lifting their metal hands. This is the end now. Smoke comes out, black smoke drifting over the city. People in the streets see it now. They're running toward the East River, thousands of them, dropping in like rats. Now the smoke's spreading faster. It's reached Times Square. People are trying to run away from it, but it's no use. They're falling like flies. Now the smoke's crossing 6th Avenue, 5th Avenue, 100 yards away. It's 50 feet.
You know, and if we start thinking about that and conserving our energy, you can start using what more? Your brain. Their heads were bigger. And so that means they use more brain power. And another thing that really stuck around towards this, like, quote unquote, maybe evolution, diminution of men, is that their hands grew larger. Because the hands, we can use the hands. So you think about, I wouldn't say Crane from the Ninja Turtles. I don't know if he had hands but think about him. You know, he resided in like this pod and he used basically this manly structure. I mean, this big structure he controlled that to do his bidding. And so it's something like that. He's like a brain, but these things still had arms. They just had arms. They had arms and a big old brain. They lost the use of everything else. They didn't need it. They only kept what was vital to them in their survival. And that would be hands for building things, hands for building, and your brain for thinking up the things to build, for the intelligence to build the apparatuses or the structures or the mechanisms that you need to survive. If you think about that in the context of the War of the Worlds, if you actually watch that movie, if you watch any version of it, you think about those things and like what he was able to transcribe. You think about that, and if you read anything now, if you read some of these, go to Talking with Ritos /27, has those articles in there where you can link on it that talks about these things in depth. And we talked about it on that episode. It's just how aliens could be an evolution of man. But what if Mars, way millions of years back, was an actual planet? What if it was an actual planet with life, and they, over time, over many of years, the Earth starts changing, because that's what the Earth does. I mean, that's what planets do. They change. Climates change. Atmospheres change. And so you have those different factors. So what if we were alien? What if we are the aliens of the future? Maybe it's like Kal-El and Superman. Their planet was just destroyed, and so they start sending people out. They start sending out scouts basically to scout the land and maybe take over things. So it was a great book, and I do recommend it. It's I recommend the podcast. This is where I got it. You can actually get the novel. It's up, it's online because a lot of people can like share it because it's like copyright free now. And so you can read it there. You can go to the podcast, which I listened to. And that podcast was the Master Classics podcast. That's what I was able to listen to it from. Actually, it's a great telling by this narrator. His name is BJ Harrison. So I recommend you go check that out. And another food for thought, another one I want to just throw at you guys. I wrote this down. I don't know where I got it. I'm pretty sure I got it in the book somewhere. It says, living qualities of the machine. I don't know why I wrote that down. I think I just put it in the show notes because I suspect that it was in context of the machines having some sort of organic makeup or functionality, i.e. nanobots. Think about nanobots being able to go into your body and to be able to inject into your body and your bloodstream with the possibility of maybe destroying diseased cells like cancerous cells and such. Don't really know how I came up with that, but that was just a little bit of food for thought. Okay, now we're just gonna go to a little. I'm gonna give you an intro to the 1939 Orson Welles radio drama of the War of the Worlds. It happened on October 30th of 1938. Basically, that was Halloween Eve. Halloween Eve, or another one, a way they would like to talk, they call it as Devil's Night. It's basically the night that go and just cause mischief, And if you think about kids and just annoying people who just want to just go cause mischief and just cause a lot of anxiety for a lot of people and a lot of just trouble for people, pull pranks and such, go ring on the doorbells and run, something like that, They broadcasted this on that day. And, basically what really happened was, he did it so well, he did it in the form of a newscast, and so with this newscast, he was able to break in, and so they did it, and they based it on like the Hindenburg disaster because that happened like maybe a few months, maybe a couple years back or a few months back or something like that. So it's very relevant. It's very close to the time at which they actually produced this one. And so they did this and in one of the, as a newscast. And so they rewrote it, the location of the invasion, the location of the vessel crashing to Earth. A lot of people knew because they advertised it as a radio drama. However, there was a story about there was another show on before them and they had low ratings. There was another show on before it or when it started. And it featured a famous ventriloquist dummy. But I was thinking okay, ventriloquism. You have a ventriloquist who has a dummy, but you're doing it over the radio. So how do you know it's a dummy? Just saying. And so a lot of people tune in later. And what happens is they think it's real. In this town of Grover Hills or something. I think it's Grover Hills. And so they start freaking out. A lot of people start freaking out. That's why they call this one the panic broadcast, because it caused so much of a disturbance upon this town and these people, millions of people actually, because it was a radio drama. So this transmission was being broadcasted around the nation. But, they focused on this town because that's where it was supposed to be reported from. This newscaster was out there reporting from there. And it was all narrated by Orson Welles. And if you guys really want to read up on that, not read up, but actually a good documentary on it, it's a fair documentary. It seems like some of the people actually they were interviewing during that time back in 1939 or 40 something. It seemed a little fake, but yet if these people are real, whoa, because it seemed so dramatic. They were so dramatic that it was this thing, and it came to the earth, and I felt so strange. And it was so weird just watching them because it was so dated, but yet it looked like they could have faked it. But yet, I think it was real, actually. Let me say real life. I thought it was a dramatization. I really did. But I think it's actually real people. So check it out. You can check it out on PBS. Just type in War of the Worlds. You just have to type in your zip code so that they know where you are. And then you just choose I chose Tucson, Arizona. And then boom, I was there and I was able to watch it for free. So go check out that on pbs.com. You can check out that documentary. I recommend that. And hey, we're going to get to that discussion now of War of the Worlds. So now you guys have a little bit of food for thought. So when we're speaking, you won't be in the limbo. So if you haven't seen the movie, if you read the book, so you probably already know. And a lot of this is just me speaking unclearly, rather fast into a microphone that you're listening to. So sorry about that. So, but other than that, just fast forward. If you want to, just fast forward. Just go into the actual program right now. I try to make it interesting. Come on, people. No, just kidding. Now we're going to get to this discussion, and I'm sorry for the quality. I messed up. I punished myself. I gave myself some floggings, about 30 lashes. It hurt, but I'm surviving. I'm here. So go ahead and listen to that. Thank you guys for listening. We're going to get to this conversation with myself and Chris, the Rupel, and this is the 2005 War of the Worlds. This is our discussion on that. The main dish. Alrighty, people. I hope you like that. Now we are going to do that other one, but I'm not going to tack it onto this podcast. But I will be releasing that discussion on 2 days. I think it's maybe 2 days from now. Friday. You'll be able to check out that discussion with me and Chris about War of the Worlds, because I still have a lot more content that way to go through and edit through, so as to not repeat ourselves too much. So hope you enjoyed that little broadcast. And so, hey, join us back here on Friday in your feed on iTunes and on the website, wherever you download it from. And we'll have that one up for you then, okay? Thank you guys for listening once again, and that's a wrap, but not a burrito.